Welcome everybody to today's video and hope you're having a great time. If you followed the channel a bit, then you are well aware that I'm a nuthead when it comes to all things impulse responses, or also called IRs. IRs, for the people totally new to recording guitars out there, are basically what we use to emulate cabinets. I'm the proud owner of a Marshall 1960 AV 4x12 speaker cabinet, one of the most iconic speakers out there, loaded with the Marshall customized Vintage 30, the G12 Vintage. And while I always wanted to have this particular tone somehow captured, I was always hesitant of creating my own impulse responses because I thought I weren't not good enough of an, let's say, sound engineer or something, until recently. And the results which I achieved are really great, or at least I personally find them great. So, and this encouraged me to do this video in order to show you that anybody can do their own impulse responses, basically. I want to show you what impulse responses are, how you can create them on your own, and of course I want to show you the sounds which I got out of shooting my own impulse responses. And the best is yet to come. The impulse responses which I shot are available as a free download in the link in the video description below. So without further ado, let's get started. So before we dive into creating our own impulse responses, let's first talk about what impulse responses actually are. Now, impulse responses are actually supposed to capture the type of reverberation which is caused by a certain room. So we want to basically capture the reflections of a room. In terms of guitar cabinet emulation, what happens here is that we have, first of all, some test tone. This could be white noise, or this could be a sine frequency sweep. And we are actually outputting this as clean as possible out of the speaker cabinet, and we're microphoning, or we're basically recording this with the microphone. And what then happens is that we are checking the test tone, which we have originally created, and the recorded test tone, and we're comparing these two. And the difference between, let's say, the original test tone and the frequency response, which we recorded, basically, by some, let's say, algorithmic procession, leads to the impulse response, which is basically nothing else than an EQ curve which matches exactly the tone of the room in this particular, let's say, cabinet room microphone combination. So that's what all an impulse response is. This impulse response is a small wave file which you then can load in a so-called impulse response loader. There are plenty of free options out there. NADIR is the one which I'm using over here because it's first of all free, it's of great use, it's very easy to handle, and offers a good bunch of features which we need in order to demonstrate or check out what's going on in regards of impulse responses. Great, now that we have talked about what impulse responses are, let's talk about how we can create them. The most important tool in order to create these impulse responses, apart from the impulse response loader, which I right now assume you already have and you already know how to use, is the Deconvolver software. I'm using Voxenko Deconvolver because this is widely adapted throughout the industry, and there are plenty of YouTube videos out there explaining also how to use this plugin. So in case I, for some whatever reason, am lacking to explain this in a sufficient way to you, then there's also other material out there on YouTube explaining you how to use this plugin. And once you installed and open it up, this is what you're getting. This is the entire Voxenko Deconvolver. We're not bothering right now for the settings over here, but instead for the test tone generation. Here you can set up the respective parameters with which you want to create your frequency swipe. I would recommend using the settings which I have over here. You can tinker around with playing with the duration. The impulse response packs which I created, which you can download in the video description below, is set to 60 seconds instead of the 3 seconds, but the 3 seconds are absolutely sufficient to show you what's going on and to also not have really any loss in detail. So I'm just generating the test tone over here. Should normally be dumped on the desktop folder. However, I'm not using the desktop over here because I already created the sweep before, and I'm just dragging this into Reaper right now. So let's close this over here. And what we now can see is, you already can see it actually. You already can see that the amplitude is always going to the max, so we have a clear amplitude, and the frequency is just changing, meaning the sine wave is going faster and faster and faster up until the 22,000 cycles per second, which equals 22 kilohertz. And having no effects on this, having the volume back down massively, this is what it sounds like. Now, what we're actually doing over here with this test tone is we're putting this out of our DAW, then into the solid state power amplifier. That then goes into the cabinet. That is then picked up by the microphone, and the microphone signal is going straight into the DAW again. However, there's a different method which I want to show you right now, how we can instantly create an impulse response, because I don't have a cabinet right now here at this place. And that is, we can use blended impulse responses to create a single impulse response out of the blend of those. For this, I prepared basically the NAD-IR, where I simply went ahead and created an impulse response to blend to my liking. Basically, I just randomly took something which I could get my mind on. Make sure that you're taking away the resonance, or I personally don't like to set up the resonance because that is playing around, tinkering around with the impulse responses originally created. And yeah, so this is my impulse response. Let's hear what it sounds like very quickly. Let me set this up over here. Also over here. But this is not being used for time being. So, just having the red tone from Vadim Taranov enabled and engaged on this impulse response. This is what it sounds like. Yeah, without impulse response, it would sound like this. So you can already hear it. So there you have that. Okay, that's what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like with the impulse response, normalizing the volume levels over here and taking out the actual amplifier over here. What we now want to do is we want to render the test tone with the impulse response applied. And what we want to do is we want to render a little bit longer than the initial sine sweep is. In this case, I'm just taking plus 500 milliseconds, not obstructing anything in the quality of the impulse response, and then moving over to render. I'm now going ahead and setting this to the mono channel, leaving it as a WAV file with all the normal standard stuff going on, and naming it respectively. And important, make sure that you bound your render to the time selection so that you're not taking the entire project. Rendering that file over here. Now I could see that there already was a small clipping, especially in the low end. I don't want this to happen. So what I'm doing is I'm backing down the volume here a little bit. So I'm just taking this a little bit away, and I'm going to render this again so that I have no clipping whatsoever. Now you have seen there's no clipping going on over here. And I will be now loading this actual file into Reaper so that we can also have a little bit of learning out of that. So grabbing the test tone and loading this over here. Now, by comparing the two, actually, this signal, this over here is the same like this over here, but you can see that the amplitude is massively differentiating throughout the entire frequency range. And that is the EQ curve, which is basically created by the impulse response. Just wanted to show you this. For example, the low end is not as present as it is on the test tone. So that's where you're basically having a low shelf. And over here, you're also having a high shelf in the higher frequency ranges. So you're getting that smooth guitar tone, actually, or that guitar cabinet tone. Okay, taking this away because this was just the sole purpose of showing you what's going on with the impulse response. Now what we want to actually do is we want to create the impulse response itself. So now we're loading our test file first over here. We're browsing for our test file, which is the 3-second swipe. And we're now browsing for the created test tone, which is this over here. And now, if I would just simply click on process, in theory, I would already create my impulse response. All would be fine. However, there are two things we want to take into consideration. I'm leaving them deactivated, but I still want to show you what they're all about. First of all, normalize to -3 dBFS and MP transform. Let's start with the normalization. The normalization is there to create unified volume levels throughout multiple created impulse responses. So in case you're making a pack, you want to make sure that your impulse responses are being normalized to a unified volume level, because there's nothing more annoying than always having to adjust the volume when you create single impulse responses when selecting the best out of your collection. So that's what you want to have in case you're creating an impulse pack on your own. Since I want to stay as true as possible to the original signal, I'm not enabling this right now. Second thing is the MP transform, minimum phase transform. It basically shifts the phase in such a way that you're not getting phase cancellation when you are blending this impulse response with other impulse responses. However, I feel there's a small sacrifice in detail. So due to my initial goal to stay as true to the original tone as possible, I'm also disabling this. What I would then do is I would click on process, and you could see that pop up. It already generated within milliseconds the impulse response. And the suffix which is added is the underline DC. Now, this actually can be used in order to load this directly into the impulse response. And that's what I'm going to do right now. So I'm going over here to NAD-IR, making sure again that I'm not tweaking around with or playing around with the resonance, because I want to have the impulse response to remain untouched by any kind of post-processing within the impulse response loader itself. Let's move over to the respective output folder, and here I got my DC test file. And I already pre-recorded some riffing, so I will load in the exact same amplifier settings on both tracks over here. So I got now track 1 and track 2, which I'm going to be comparing. You have to trust me that I'm basically having the same red tone settings over here. Yeah. So the tone, the only differentiating thing is the impulse response itself. Yeah. So here we got on track 1, we got the test tone IRs, the blend from the OwnHammers, and here we got the self-created impulse response fully panned, so that we're only having that respective impulse running. And yeah, let's see how it sounds like. So I'm going to make a loop out of this, setting this up, and let's go. Now, what you definitely can tell is that there is a volume boost on the self-created impulse response. This could be because I'm doing maybe something small wrong, I'm not sure. This could be because I'm not normalizing the tracks before. But from a frequency response type, you're actually now having the blend of the two impulse responses set into one different, or set into a single impulse response. I'm now backing off the tone a little bit from my self-created impulse response so that we can get closer to the original source. So that sounds now way more similar than it sounded before with the different volume levels, because volume is something which definitely manipulates the perception of tone. Now, that said, this is the process how we went ahead and created an impulse response via blending different impulse responses and then using Voxengo Deconvolver to actually create the impulse response out of that. However, I will now roll a small video of the setup, which I have done in the rehearsal room, but the process is actually exactly the same. The only difference is that I'm basically recording the sine sweep output through that chain and then rendering that result instead of the rendering of the sine sweep directly with the impulse response FX plugin slapped onto the respective track. So let's first roll the video, and then I'm going to show you how my own impulse responses sound like. Hey, what's up everybody? Hi. I want to show you today how we're going to make some impulse responses completely on our own. Let me just show you the setup which I have over here, and we'll be and then we'll be shooting some IRs, shall we? So first of all, what I have over here is my trusty PC where I got Reaper loaded. Hang on a little moment, let me twist around. So now you got the the standard camera. So over here I got Reaper loaded, and via Voxengo Deconvolver I created different sine sweeps, one being 3 seconds long and the other one being a whole minute long, just to test if that makes a difference in terms of quality. My audio interface, the Line 6 UX2, is hooked up directly to the PC, and here you can see we got the microphone input set up, we got one analog out, and we got the headphone going out. The headphone only being something for me to monitor. Now, what basically happens is, when I would play this file, that's a sine wave, 3 seconds long. That is being played out of the analog out, and that goes via this cable straight into my solid state power amplifier. This is the Harley Benton. Hang on, let me zoom onto this one over here, or autofocus. This is the Harley Benton Thunder 99. This is a 100 watt pedal form based solid state power amplifier. Has hopefully not that much coloring to it. I'm cranking the gain to a decent level so that I'm not getting that much of clipping or any type of, let's say, unwanted harmonics. And this then is going via the speaker output into my Marshall 1960 AV cabinet over here, 16 ohms. I'm also going to try out if the impedance does a difference. Over here, I got 3 microphones, which I will be testing out. I got the, this is the Apex condenser microphone, hang on. I don't know the model, I'll check it out and let you know in the main video. This over here is my trusty SM58, the LQZ version or something. So I think that is a low impedance or something. Yeah, but I took off the grill cloth. So over here, I took off the grill just because people say that emulates kind of the tone of an SM57. It actually does not, as far as I'm aware, but nonetheless, this is a good microphone to test. And I also have a Philips SBC MD650 over here. That's going to be mounted on my mic stand over here, where, yeah, hang on, let me change that's way better. Okay, yeah, that goes to my microphone stand over here. And this microphone signal in turn is re-recorded into the UX2. And what actually happens is that we record basically the frequency response of my cabinet miking situation, and then I think it's called deconvolute. We deconvolute the signal which we recorded towards the original signal, and that is what gives us the impulse response in the end. So we are generating a frequency response matching this original signal, going through this entire chain and back. And also over here on the mic input, I'm setting the gain to a decent level so that I'm not getting too much of a clipping or any kind of, let's say, totally overload saturations from the mic preamp or something. Yeah, let's see how that goes, and you'll hear in the end result how the impulse responses are sounding like. Thanks. So now comes the most interesting part. What do my self-created impulse responses sound like? And here's the results. So let me show you the signal chain first. I'm basically having a double noise gate over here, directly going into the Vadim Taranov red tone, which I set respectively. And then I'm moving over to the impulse responses, which I created. Now, to take a short look at what I have over here, I got the Apex, the Philips, and the SM58 microphone in a cap, cone, and edge position, and I got 2 room microphones, the room back and room front, just to give a little bit more of options. Also, all of these impulse responses are available in the non-MPT version. However, due to blending reasons, I'm now staying with the MPTs over here. So I'm just loading the SM58 cap over here, and this is what it sounds like. That sounds really good, actually. I really like them a lot. And I'm super excited that it had worked out so well. I'm now going ahead and blending a little bit, maybe with the cone, for example. So if I totally go over to the cone, this is what it sounds like. Very boomy, very bassy, but I think blending it gives you the perfect mix. So now I'm comparing this, actually a little bit of an unfair comparison, but I still want to do it. I'm comparing it now to OwnHammer, and I'm also comparing it to a Bogren digital impulse. And there are a few differences which I will then point out, and how you can actually work with my impulse responses to hopefully get fairly similar good tones. So here, first of all, the OwnHammer impulse response. Hang on, let me take that out of the way. Now, compared to these different impulse responses, mine sound a little bit more muddy. What you also might recognize is that I had to boost my impulse responses with a little bit more gain than the other ones. The other ones are on 0 dB. Getting that output, I had to boost them a little bit up to get to that level. Actually being a little bit over the top. I'm now pushing back to 3 dB. So this might be more reasonable. So this over here is my own. This is the OwnHammer, and this is the Bogren. Moving back to my own. So first of all, that's the first thing, the volume difference. Then it seems like the others have way more treble, way more high end. You could either select the Philips cap, because that is very, high, very high endish. Two other tips which I have for you in case you might want to be using still the cap and the cone blend, for example, to give it a little bit more of a room feel. Either crank the resonance knob over here, that will give you a little bit push on the low end and the high end. So that's giving you a little bit more of that high-end hi-fi sound. Another possibility would be backing up the resonance back to 0 and cranking the presence a little bit on your amplifier. And there you have it. Those are my impulse responses. Of course, I could not now walk through all of the different impulse responses. You might do that on your own. Check them out in the link in the video description below. They're absolutely 100% free. There is a PayPal donation link if you feel that you want to value what I do and what I have done over here. I'd be happy for any type of contribution, but no pressure at all. It's 100% free for you to download. Check it out in the link in the description below. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you have stuck through the entire video, then mad respect to you. Yeah, if you liked what you saw over here, or if you're digging the impulse responses, please leave me a comment. Share, like, subscribe, all that jazz. It helps me out. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you in the next video. Take care. Happy chugging.